I will briefly introduce myself to those who may not know me. I'm usually sitting back there, comfortably hiding during the first service behind the piano, the choir. I'm an English instructor at Carl Sandburg College, and my husband Tom and I have 3 kids, 14, 12, and 8. And we feel just really grateful to have been able to raise them in this church. They really do feel like they have a church family here. I know that probably seems like one of those cliche expressions, a church family, but they really do feel like they have just this wonderful extended network of people who know them and care about them and are rooting for them. People who bring my oldest coins from around the world because they know he loves travel and geography and foreign currency. People who are the first to cheer for our middle son's latest dance moves. And people who scan ingredient lists to try to help keep our youngest safe with her food allergies. And truly, I could fill the entirety of this message, that'd be kind of fun, with examples of how people in this church have helped my children feel valued and known. But I will just share with you one specific example of this kind of love in action. And that was a few years ago, my middle son decided to create his own Pokemon-like card game featuring characters from Lego Ninjago. So always creating, always inventing this one. And he developed this whole elaborate game involving points and dice and players taking turns. And he was so proud of this game. And he brought the deck of cards to show his Sunday school teachers, who at the time were Deb Strock and Donna Booten. And after Sunday school, Debbie came up to me and she was telling me about how great the game was and what a genius Finn was and how they played the game. And it really worked. They played the game. I mean, they took the time to try playing this involved, hand-drawn game that he had invented. And that is love in action. And meanwhile, Finn is probably lucky that Debbie and Donna were his teachers at the time, because he has me for a Sunday school teacher now. And I'm pretty sure that if he brought in the game that he had invented and wanted to play, I probably would say no. So that worked out well for him. But this is just one way in which I have felt humbled on my faith journey here by the people and the care and the kindness and affection they've shown Tom and me and our children and my parents then when my parents moved here. So just a little quick background of that. Tom and I moved to Galesburg about 15 years ago. And we moved here from Princeton, Illinois, where we had been members of a Methodist church. I had grown up Methodist, but now Tom had grown up Presbyterian. So growing up on a farm in Elviston, he'd been gone to the Presbyterian church. And I do apologize, by the way, as a Methodist, if you ever hear the occasional trespasses instead of debts sneaking out during the Lord's Prayer, it might be me. I usually remember debts, but 30 years of trespasses sort of etched their way into my brain, so it still slips out sometimes. But when we moved to Galesburg, Tom wondered if we might try the Presbyterian church. And I knew the differences in theology were slight. I did not realize, however, the whole approach to finding pastors is very different. And I would learn that. But anyway, so I agreed. So we were open to trying a variety of, just the different kind of traditional denominations. And we just wanted to find a church that would feel like the right fit. So we attended a few services at a few churches, including this one. And after attending a few services at another church, we returned here, and then we came back again. And fun side note that this actually happened to be at a time when First Presbyterian had an interim pastor. And I'm sure that the messages we heard were fine, and the choir sang beautifully, I'm certain, and the service was meaningful and lovely. But it was without question the feeling that we got from the people here that kept us coming back. Well, that, and then once Marge Tolley had introduced herself to us and learned our names, she decided that we had to become members here, and she wouldn't let us go anywhere else. But really, it was the people. Just everyone seemed down to earth and friendly and just approachable and warm and funny and earnest. And we also learned about the great tradition that First Presbyterian Church has with mission work and community outreach, and that mattered a lot to us, and that made a big impression on us too. And 15 years later, I am so glad that we chose this church. I'm glad that Marge Tolley wouldn't let us go. So a lot has happened in our lives since then. Our family of 2 has become a family of 5, and my parents moved to Galesburg, and they have become members too. I've had the pleasure these past few years of being part of 3 generations singing in the church choir together with my dad and my oldest son, Jay, and that's been pretty awesome. And as Tom and I have gone through things in our lives, both the good and the bad, I really have been humbled. There's no other word. I've been humbled by the compassion that you all have shown to us. And I've been humbled too by the work that people do here. I mean, behind the scenes, it's really remarkable to help people in Galesburg, to help keep First Presbyterian Church going, especially during these times of transition, with people helping with all of the mission work that we do, with outreach. I mean, everything from tending flowers to the work that deacons do to helping in the kitchen. It really is humbling. And while this kind of, humbling is connected to the overall idea I want to talk about today, this is just really one aspect, I think, of something bigger. As I have gotten older and started to think about my faith, maybe more deeply, but at least differently, something that has occurred to me with increasing strength is this idea about the connection between humility and wisdom and faith and the way those things are related. Maybe it started during a conversation a few years ago with a well-meaning friend. My friend was asking about my faith. She'd been raised in a church, but like many friends my age, had walked away from it when she got older. And she was telling me that sometimes she missed it and that she envied people who could have faith. So we were having this conversation, and I welcomed it. I really did. The majority of my friends and peers either do not attend church regularly or do not have a religious faith, or both. And it's rare, though, that they ask me about my beliefs. So on this day, this friend was asking, and she asked something that I've heard asked or implied, many times, a number of times, but she said something like, "I just don't understand how someone intelligent can believe in God or can be religious. How do you do it?" she asked. "How can you be a thinking person and still believe?" And I suppose what would have been really nifty in that moment would have been if I'd been able to just come up with the perfect Bible verse, as my answer. If I just had Bible verses floating around in my head and was ready to grab the right one for just such an occasion. I am, however, an English major and an English instructor, so I didn't grab a Bible verse as explanation. I grabbed Shakespeare. I quoted for her my favorite line from Hamlet. And that's the line, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." I love that line so much. I always have. And while I realize there is so much more to faith, of course, if I really boil it down for me, it comes down to this idea that there is simply so much more than we can know. And accepting that fact might seem simple, but it is also a great act of humility. Turning to another writer, I came across this fall a quote by another one of my favorites, Ray Bradbury. And it may seem funny to turn to Ray Bradbury. He's best known for works of fantasy and science fiction, such as the classic Fahrenheit 451 and the Martian Chronicles. So it's maybe funny to turn to him for an understanding of faith. But listen to what he had to say back in 2010 at the age of 90, a few years before he died. A CNN article says, Bradbury, who turns 90 this month, says he will sometimes open one of his books late at night and cry out, "Thanks to God." "I sit there and cry because I haven't done any of this," he told Sam Weller, his biographer and friend. "It's a God-given thing, and I'm so grateful, so grateful. The best description of my career as a writer is at play in fields of the Lord." Weller said he once asked Bradbury if he prayed, and Bradbury told him, "Joy is the grace we say to God." Isn't that beautiful? Joy is the grace we say to God. And I don't think it has to be one way or the other. I think you can still pray in the traditional way and still believe this. But I love thinking about it this way, that our life can be an act of prayer, an act of humility and gratitude and thanksgiving. And for those who feel that it is impossible to reconcile education and intelligence with faith, who believe that one has to choose either science or religion, I loved this quote from Bradbury from a 1996 interview as well. He said, "Science and religion have to go hand in hand with the mystery, because there is a certain point beyond which you say there are no answers. The role of the preacher is to remind us, don't forget to pay attention to the fact that you are alive. Just the mere fact, the glory of getting up every morning and looking at the sunrise or a good rainfall or whatever and saying, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. There is a certain point beyond which you say there are no answers." And I find that beautiful. And I've been thinking more and more about the ways in which faith requires us, I think, to be okay with saying, I cannot know everything. I cannot be the source of all wisdom. Mankind cannot be the source of all wisdom. To be able to hand over the keys, to accept the unknown, to accept the mystery. This may seem like the easiest thing in the world, but I argue that it is not. I believe that to do so with great feeling, with great depth of thinking and sincerity, requires the greatest humility, because it requires us to say, I am not in charge. And we like being in charge of our own lives, don't we? We like feeling like we are in control. When bad things happen, I didn't work hard enough, didn't study hard enough, I made some bad choices, I messed up, I'll learn from this, I'll do better next time. When good things happen, wow, I really worked hard. Look how my hard work paid off. I had the right work ethic, the right values, the right lifestyle. I made good choices, and look how great things turned out. We like feeling like we are in control. So it's hard, I think, for us to feel true humility, to take our hands off the wheel. Now, I'm not saying that we should just give up on trying to make the best possible choices for our lives. I'm not saying, oh well, c'est la vie, God's in charge, pass the bacon and the butter. Of course we should still do our best. Doing our best matters. But knowing even within the framework where we are doing our best, that we are not ultimately in charge, that we cannot know everything or control everything. And the hardest maybe, that sometimes we are just plain wrong. That requires humility. And we are not terribly good at it. I'm working on it. I know I'm not terribly good at it. I think a lot of us are not. Thanks to social media, we are a selfie culture. We even have selfie sticks, so we can take better selfies. And sometimes on social media, we do a pretty good job of admitting small imperfections and mess-ups. I think of these as our little humbles. And I always appreciate it when friends, in the name of keeping it real, admit to forgotten appointments, mountains of laundry, baking fails. Admitting these sorts of imperfections helps remind us that we're human, and it's a way of staying a little humble. And we do pretty well with those. But when I think about humility and faith, I think of the big humbles. And the big humbles, at least for me in my life, those are a lot harder. And those are the moments where we have to just own up to something. I was wrong. I was wrong about this person. I was wrong about the way I saw something. I was wrong about an opinion I held for years. I was wrong about the way I handled something. In this particular moment, I did not show kindness or mercy. I did not exert the self-discipline I should have. I was a hypocrite. I was too worried about trying to prove I was right or showing, that I wanted to get my way to see the big picture. I lost my temper. I justified selfishness or weakness. I've made excuses. I've been going down the wrong path. I've not been the person I can be, the person that you want me to be, God. Those are the hard ones, I think. Not letting ourselves a little off the hook with mitigating circumstances, no excuses, just admitting sometimes in those big situations that we've just been plain wrong. And I think these are the bring us to our knees moments, the ask God for forgiveness moments, the pray for mercy and be thankful for grace moments. And the older that I get, the more I believe that it's really hard to come to faith without being willing to experience this kind of profound humility. Because it is in these moments that we stop relying on our own wisdom and turn to something bigger than ourselves. Teaching Sunday school, it is always interesting to try to explain some of the stories, especially in the Old Testament, to children. I don't know how long it's been since you've hunkered down with the Old Testament, but it gets violent sometimes. There's wrath. And it has helped to frame, I think, for the kids some of these stories as being less about punishment and more about the need for humility. King Nebuchadnezzar, the Pharaoh, the Pharisees, these are just a few examples of people in the Bible who suffered from pride. Full of themselves and relying on their own greatness and wisdom, they treated others poorly, usually people in more vulnerable, lowly positions. After escaping slavery in Egypt, the Israelites were made to wander around the desert for 40 years, not because God is cruel, but because they didn't trust him enough. They believed in themselves and their own opinions instead. They had too much pride in themselves and their judgment and not enough humility. C.S. Lewis said that the essential vice, the utmost evil, is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. And the Bible is filled with wonderful passages about the need for humility and the way that humility can lead to true wisdom and faith. And just a few of my favorite examples are from Proverbs. And the first one is Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And another is Proverbs chapter 15, verse 33. The fear of the Lord is the instruction for wisdom, and before honor comes humility. I think, too, of some of the lyrics from one of today's hymns that we sang, There's a Wideness in God's Mercy. The beginning of that second verse said, "For the love of God is broader than the measures of the mind." Of course, as we get ready to celebrate the season of Advent and Christmas, one of our great reminders about humility comes in the person of Jesus Christ, who from the very circumstances of his birth was an example. In a 2016 interview, Bono, the lead singer of the band U2, said, "Christ teaches that God is love." What does that mean? What it means for me, a study of the life of Christ. Love here describes itself as a child born in straw poverty, the most vulnerable situation of all, without honor. He continued to say, "The point of the death of Christ is that Christ took on the sins of the world so that what we put out did not come back to us, and that our sinful nature does not reap the obvious death. That's the point. It should keep us humbled." So this is something I know I need to keep working on, and I appreciate being on this faith journey with you and all of you, and I thank you for letting me provide this message today. Would you join me in prayer? God, whose works and whose understanding is beyond our comprehension, help us remember that we cannot have all the answers. Help us be able to admit when we are wrong in ways both big and small. Help us remember to turn to you, and that true faith requires humility. As we embark upon this season of Advent, help us find meaning in the mystery. And in gratitude and in thanksgiving, help us find faith. Amen.